Do you yearn for travel that involves outdoor adventure and learning? I do. I also have a passion for all things farming and agriculture. I've traveled to exotic jungles to learn about growing chocolate. I even once owned my own organic vegetable and sunflower farm. And now I'm planning my journey back to agriculture. Agritourism, defined as travel that involves some type of agricultural experience. Agritourism is all about entertaining. But the marketing strategist in me knows that at its core, agritourism is really about educating, and education affects change. My future farm needs to deliver a profound experience to all of its visitors. It needs to educate people about food, health, and climate. Join me to learn from experienced agritourism farmers and entrepreneurs and help me build my future farm strategy. And who knows, maybe one day soon you'll find yourself in a tropical jungle cutting open cacao pods with a machete, or savoring an outdoor plant-to-plate community dinner with 100 guests at a farm in Illinois. So let's tap into the agritourist in you. Her business is called Mandy's Mushrooms. Her name is Amanda Dye, and she is passionate about making the kingdom of fungi more accessible to the general public through mushroom education. Mushrooms are mysterious to me. The more I read about mushrooms and the more the world learns about mushrooms, the more we learn about the significant impact they have on controlling. Actually, managing and overseeing are probably better words. Managing and overseeing nature. There is so much you can do in the kitchen with mushrooms, and there are so many mushroom varieties to experiment with. Many people say they do not like mushrooms, but I challenge you to try a recipe that contains some fresh, locally grown mushrooms. I think you might just change your mind. And then there are all the medicinal properties of mushrooms. That's another whole world to explore. I have not had the opportunity to attend a mushroom forage as of yet, but it is something I intend on doing in the near future, maybe with Amanda at her new property in New York, which we will discuss. Amanda is a young entrepreneur with a passion for mushroom agriculture, mycology, and I love people that are passionate about agriculture. I get very excited for all the amazing things that Amanda is doing now and for all the amazing things that she will create in her future. I hope you share in my excitement as we explore the world of mushrooms, aka mycology. This is Jen Ross, your Agritourist podcast host. Enjoy my conversation with Amanda from Mandy's Mushrooms. And if you like our podcast, please leave us a review and subscribe. So it's a pleasure meeting you. How are you feeling?
Doing better. Yeah, no, last week I was really down for the count. It was not good. But yeah, on the mend finally.
Good. Excellent. So this is a topic that I've wanted to cover for a long time, and I haven't found the right person to talk to. So when I came across your Instagram and then read all about what you were doing and how you're going about it, I was really excited to speak with you. Yeah. So Amanda, tell me a little bit, just talk to me a little bit about your backstory, and lead me up to how you got into mushrooms.
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in a town with kind of like a rural history. It's more suburban now. So was working on farms a lot growing up and worked a lot with livestock, a lot with vegetable production, but didn't really find my way into working with mushroom production until around like 2019, just before COVID. And really all the time spent at home during COVID was what really led me into this full blown kind of career with mushrooms at this moment. And I always had that curiosity. And I feel like this is a very similar story with a lot of people who I talk to who find their way into mycology or working with mushrooms, or even foraging. And in that capacity is just that childhood memory of going out and seeing a puffball or another jelly fungus. And that's kind of the gateway for a lot of people, I feel like. So yeah.
So what was the connection though to farming in general? Any type, a lot of people obviously don't have that connection. What was it for you? Do you have was it something you read, someone you met, a childhood connection, a childhood memory of why you prefer having hands in the soil or being out in nature than somebody else who might want to be doing something on the computer or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I consider myself to like split my time a lot between doing outdoors work, maybe like 50 to 60% of the time, and then the rest is administrative, at least for right now. And I think, yeah, that really it taps into a side of the brain that I think for hands-on work, it's so important to be out there, and especially with farming, be able to see the environment. And when I was doing a lot of work with livestock in particular, it's sometimes different with mushrooms because I'm working indoors primarily right now. But with outdoor mushroom farming, this is true too. But working with the seasons is really it's important for your mental health. Especially in the winter season, New Englanders, we don't get enough sunlight. So being out there in the early morning, even on days when you necessarily don't want to, I think that's been a huge part of farming. And, it's something that over the years it's made me fonder of just the whole experience of working on farms and everything.
So you went to Clark, correct? Clark
Yeah.
University. And so tell me about what you studied there. And because I know you did a lot there. I don't know if the Worcester Common Ground was through through your university, or just tell me a little bit about that time frame, because I know that obviously was pivotal for you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I came to Clark right in the midst of COVID as well. So I was there in 2020 is when I started, and I started as a biology major. And that's kind of how I first got connected with David Hibbett, Professor Hibbett, to me, kind of. And he's just an awesome mentor, and he was my advisor for my capstone. And he is a evolutionary biologist who
Wow.
specializes in mycology and works with mushrooms, and has been really amazing. And so I started in biology, but then kind of at the end of that first year, I was like, this doesn't really cover everything that I wanted to work in. And, I love farming, I love the science and STEM side of biology. But I was really seeking more of that like community component where you're working with people and doing more of like the application of the science. And that's kind of how I found myself working with Worcester Common Ground. Um,
Was just for people to know? I mean, obviously I read about it, but tell me about that organization.
Sure, yeah. They're a nonprofit here in Worcester, and they're a community development corporation. So they're a 501(c)(3), but they specialize in primarily affordable housing, but also kind of the wraparound services that fall under that as well for residents. So they have urban gardens. So if you're a tenant in one of their buildings, or if you're just a community member and you live nearby, you have access to those spaces. They also have a playground. They've recently added an outdoor basketball court, and they have a hydroponic rooftop garden. And
Oh, nice.
yeah, I was really fortunate to work in that space. And then the bio shelter, which is an off-grid urban garden slash urban orchard. And that's where we were doing some like mushroom growing and experimenting. Um,
And was the mushroom growing you were doing there, was it inside or outside?
It was a little bit of both, but
Okay.
primarily outside, because at the time we were still working on fundraising and getting grants to kind of insulate and fully get the inside of that building to be kind of yeah, really just insulating, climate controlled. It was kind of halfway built, and we needed to wrap up the rest of it.
So talk to me a little bit about mushroom growing, because yeah, like I know I've met farmers who are doing it outside, kind of like in the woods, a woodsy, loggy
Mhm.
area. And then you have what I see a lot of is inside growing.
Yeah,
So
totally.
what's the difference? What's the advantages or disadvantages of both? Like,
Mhm.
give me a perspective on that, because I really don't know and I'm really curious.
Yeah, no, I've done a little bit of both, and they both have their merit. I think there's a lot of skill overlap as well. I always say that outdoor cultivation can be a little bit more forgiving and hands off, which is ironic because really the main issue with cultivation that a lot of people run into and can be almost feel like defeating at a certain point is the contamination element. And when you're working outdoors and you have logs, generally, and indoors as well, the contamination rate should be around 10%. And that's kind of a livable number. And if you're commercially cultivating, you can get by with 10% of contamination. But when you're working indoors, and if you have maybe, let's say, less than sterile process, that contamination rate can shoot up to 50, 60, 70, 80% sometimes, and you'll have some like devastating losses. And there's been spawn runs where, you inoculate, you think that it's sterile and it works out, but other times, yeah, you'll just have contamination, get all sorts of molds, and that can be the main difference. And for indoor cultivation, you really have to think of your environment and the world within a world and climate controlling, really whatever space you're working in. And yeah, it kind of depends where you're starting from in the process. I feel like a lot of home cultivators are favoring starting with grain spawn or sawdust spawn, which makes it accessible, and it kind of gets you right in the middle of the mushroom life cycle so that you don't have to do the culturing or the sterile or more sterile inoculation at home. And that can be kind of helpful, especially when you're first starting out. Um,
So, okay, let me go outside first. Is there a season when you are outside? Is there a season? Is there an ideal time of year? I know you're in the New England area, Massachusetts area, so there's could be a lot of snow in certain months. So like, if I wanted to grow outside, what kind of conditions do I need to grow outside, mushrooms outside?
Yeah, so generally for starting logs outside or containers, I'll generally inoculate either at the beginning of March or April, around there, maybe all the way through May. And then that gives it a couple months in the warm season to have that spawn run and have the inoculation period colonize the entire log or the container that you're growing in. You can also inoculate in the fall when it's a little bit cooler weather. The only season you really want to stay away from is the dead of summer when it's really hot out. If you have logs and they're a little bit on the drier side and you go to inoculate them, sometimes the spawn will just struggle to really work its way through the log. It could take longer. It could have increased contamination. So yeah.
So when you say the log, is there a certain type of log? Like, is there certain condition, like, what am I looking for? Do you bring that in, or is that something that exists in nature?
Yeah, totally. So, I when I say log, I generally mean hardwood species. Every mushroom, there's some that are more picky than others, but every mushroom has logs that they prefer. And so, generally speaking, a lot of the oysters and other really popular cultivated mushrooms, they like oak wood. It doesn't matter what type of oak, but red, white oak, anything of that sort. Maple can also be good, aspens, elms, but generally staying away from softwoods and definitely staying away from any wood that is on a roadside that could have some sort of runoff. Here in Worcester, that's something that we're definitely mindful of, and I'm a little bit more picky about my logs in Worcester, because we have lead contamination and the heavy metals, they stick
Wow.
around. And so if you're growing mushrooms on wood that's contaminated or contains heavy metals, the mushrooms will absorb them as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, and I want to clarify one other thing. When you use the word inoculate,
Mhm.
what do you mean by that? Like is that like planting, not planting them, but is that kind of
Yeah.
what are you physically doing?
Yeah, it's pretty much analogous to planting a seed in the ground
Okay.
for trees or vegetables, or if you're familiar with that sort of vegetable
Yep.
garden. But yeah, for mushrooms, inoculation is just the process by taking the spores, either a liquid culture or a tissue culture, or you could take grain spawn and you're adding that into a larger substrate. So you could use the term inoculate for inoculating your agar plate when it's just going from spore to culture, or it could be for spawn going into substrate. It's all the same.
Okay, so do you always, because I'll take a walk, obviously a hike, and I see mushrooms growing in the
Mhm.
ground. They're not always growing, some of them are definitely growing out of logs or trees,
Yes, yeah.
but are there like, does it depend on the variety? Do you ever,
Mhm.
I don't want to say plant in the ground, inoculate in the ground, or is it always logs?
Yeah, so a lot of the mushrooms in commercial cultivation are primarily saprophytes, so they're wood decomposers or some sort of organic material. There's dung-loving mushrooms that primarily grow on manure or other agricultural waste. And so those are the most common. There's cultivators I've heard of in Sweden and some other countries that are cultivating mushrooms that are either ectomycorrhizal, and those ones rely on the mycorrhizal network in the ground. So they need trees and sometimes additives into the soil. I've heard of charcoal and different other additives for the substrate that make it more advantageous for the mycelium. Um, and that's been one of the hot topics in cultivation for sure, because for a long time, morels, they have such a high price point because you can, for the most part, only find them in the wild. And so you have to have a spot and you have to have the knowledge that goes along with foraging. And usually people are pretty careful about safeguarding that information. Um,
Okay, so then moving to the inside environment,
mhm.
and is that what you're doing mostly now?
Yeah, for the most part, the mushroom farm that I work at now and the Southeast Asian Coalition is all indoors, and then we do have two urban gardens. But we use our spent blocks at the urban gardens for the most part. And then I have log cultivation going at another urban garden still, but I'm not actively managing it.
So you have some diversity going on. And
Yeah,
and
definitely.
yeah. And so is this for your business or is this to help them? Like, are you working for them or with them? Like how what's going on right now? So you graduated from your program. So you have a BA in Global Environmental Studies from Clark. You're getting your master's of public administration. Is that still
Yeah, so
now? Okay.
I finished up my master's in May. So I
Oh,
am in my post
congratulations.
grad in my post grad era, I suppose. But yeah, so I've been working with Sigma since beginning my master's, a little bit before then. I've been with them about a year and a half now. And yeah, I work with them um, just about every other day, go and check the mushrooms. And there's a team of three or four of us, and we all work with the mushrooms, and it's been a great experience. Um, and yeah, it's a little bit of everything. It's like I was saying, a little bit of more hands-on physical work, and that's like the daily maintenance of working with the mushrooms and all of the procedures there, but also a little bit of administrative work. And then we've recently been branching out and doing more kind of outreach and educational programs, which I do personally for my own business, but it's been really nice to do it for Sigma. And I find it to be that's kind of the wraparound part for me, is that community element where you get to take the science and you apply it and get other people excited about it. And that's kind of what makes it all worth it.
Excellent. So tell me what you do with people for your own initiative, your own business. Like,
Yeah.
what do you, what are you teaching people? What are you doing with them? What kind of exploring are you doing with them? And I do want to talk about some different varieties of mushrooms, but let's first talk about your business and the things that you're doing because I think it's exciting.
Sure. Yeah. So I started off doing primarily foraging educational programs, so mushroom guided hikes, and I was going all year long. So I started in March, and then I was hosting one just about every month, and that was with the trustees of reservations.
Yes.
I had been working with them, and I was doing livestock farming, and they we would do programs with the goats that was very similar. It was kind of a guided hike, and you would learn about the history of the property. And after speaking with the education manager there, it became a regular program, and people were really excited. And there was one hike that we quite literally had 45 people sign up. Um, and it was amazing to see how many people were excited to learn about mushrooms, and especially in this area in Central Mass. We've got the Boston Mycology Club to the east, and then we've got the Pioneer Valley Mycology Club to the west. And there's not so much going on directly in Central Mass for mushrooms, so it was nice to be able to have
Great
something.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so yeah, that's kind of where it all originated, and then over the past couple years, it's morphed into doing art workshops. I've done some cultivation workshops with grain spawn, sawdust spawn. Hopefully be getting more into doing more of the like sterile techniques and culturing with people. Um, and yeah, I've done a couple culinary workshops. I'm by no means a trained chef, but um, have, having worked with mushrooms for a long time, I cook them a lot. And so I think that I have a few tricks up my sleeve when it comes to cooking them and making use of the odds and ends. So making spice blends and infused oils, and then making dye and doing tie dye with mushrooms like Dyer's polypore.
Okay, excellent. So, at what point did were you really confident going out there and foraging? Because I can imagine there are a lot of mushrooms that look like other mushrooms
Yes, yeah,
and could be not something you want to touch.
definitely.
So I know a friend of mine who does environmental hikes for me. He's not an expert, he's learning, and he's always like, I think that's what it is, but don't touch. And I'd be like, and we weren't like on an official mushroom forage, but it was just, it's funny. I'm like, boy, at what point does someone have this confidence that they they know the difference between these? Because there's so many mushrooms, and I'm sure you get to know your area, obviously, but still. So give me, bring me into that world a little bit.
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is definitely it is regional. So if I were to be dropped in the middle of the Rocky Mountains and I'm told to go foraging, I would not trust a single thing. I mean, I can probably narrow down to genus for a lot of species or for a lot of mushrooms that you would see, because of those similar characteristics, but it's so regional that the confidence with foraging, I would say, is really just for the Northeast. If I were to travel anywhere else, I would need to go out with an expert. And for people that are getting into it, that's what I always recommend is find someone who's been foraging in that area specifically for a long time. Um, Someone who's grown up there, been there for, 10, 15 years, that it makes a huge difference. And I will say kind of the first species that I ended up eating that was a wild mushroom was a black trumpet. And I probably saw that mushroom 5 or 6 times before I decided to eat it over the course of maybe a year or two. And I had seen it as a kid too, but this was when I was, a little bit older and was, taking field guides out with me, making a concerted effort to find edible mushrooms and find mushrooms in general. And so taking pictures helped a lot. Being able to compare, okay, I saw that mushroom 2 years ago. Let me refer to the photo. Oh yeah, it looks like this one, which also looks like this other mushroom that I found. And for those who are into foraging, black trumpet is one of the mushrooms that is recommended for beginner foragers because there's so few lookalikes, and the lookalikes that are out there are generally not going to cause problems. And so I felt like that was one mushroom that I still now recommend to people. And it was a good first step in gaining that confidence, for sure.
Excellent. So tell me about some of the common mushrooms up by you that you would see if you were taking a group out.
Definitely, yeah. So something that I always expect to see, and it's on every continent except for Antarctica, is turkey tail. It's always out there. It's a polypore mushroom. It's got amazing medicinal benefits. It's not so much a mushroom that you would want to cook up and put in pasta or put on your pizza, but I throw it in broth for chicken noodle soup or make teas and tinctures. It's wonderful for that. Um, I would say there's a lot of chicken in the woods up in this area, generally around May, generally around the spring, and fall. Hen of the woods is also up there, and those two I'd say are the kind of gateway mushrooms into people becoming really serious about their foraging. Um, Black trumpets are one of my favorites. Of course, golden chanterelles. I'd see those sporadically throughout July and August, depending on the rains. I do love the polypores, and so I collect a lot of the for tinder fungus, which grows on birch trees, and then also birch polypore. And those two, along with the turkey tail, make awesome teas and tinctures. So yeah, those are mainly the highlights and a lot of what I forage. But I mean, I'm constantly picking up things, especially, even mushrooms that are inedible. I love taking them home, doing watercolors with them. And, there's a lot of purposes and ways to, study mushrooms besides just, taking them home to eat.
And the ones you grow, even
Mhm.
through, what kind of varieties are the ones that are being grown? And are they being grown um, for food, like to sell, or for, I don't know, a food bank? Like, what are the purposes of these mushrooms being grown, and what types are the most common for people to grow and sell?
Yeah, so at the farm that I work at now with Sigma, we grow a majority oyster mushrooms. So we have a couple different species. So blue oysters, we have the black pearl oyster, which is a cultivated species. It's a mix between blue oyster and king oyster. We were growing yellow oyster at one point, but with recent kind of information coming out about how it's acting like an invasive species, we are discontinuing that. And we haven't grown in a couple months. We've had pink oyster. We've also
What does
done,
that mean? What do you mean by that? That it's acting like an invasive species?
yeah, so golden oysters, they're originally from Asia, like Northeast Asia. And they have been cultivated for a while here in the gourmet mushroom market in the United States. And with mushrooms, when you're done with the spawn, a lot of people will offer it up for compost for free to farmers. And there's no procedure for proper disposal for mushroom spawn. And so for a lot of species, lion's mane, for example, the mycelium's kind of on the weaker side. So if you leave it outside, it'll dry up. The chances that it's going to enter the general environment, the ecosystem, it's out there, but it's not super aggressive. So it's not pushing out a lot of other species. Yellow oyster, on the other hand, is really aggressive.
Okay.
And so, especially in the Midwest, you'll see logs that are just completely covered in this yellow oyster, which
Wow.
it's not a species that's native here, so technically that would make it, by any other standard, would make it an invasive species.
Okay.
Um,
Interesting.
yeah,
Hmm.
and so yeah. Besides that, I just mentioned it, but lion's mane is one of the species we grow, and that one's been really important because the demand is relatively high. And there's not a lot of supply for lion's mane, especially fresh lion's mane, or if you want to buy a larger quantity. For example, for holidays, a lot of um, holidays for the Southeast Asian community, it's really important to have mushrooms in certain dishes. And so finding that ingredient and finding that ingredient that's fresh is crucial too.
So, I've read a lot about, you know, we know a lot about mushrooms, but isn't there a lot we don't know about mushrooms? And they're looked upon as kind of I don't know what the word is, but it's almost like the brain of the part. Like they're controlling a lot of things. And
Yeah.
you read a lot about this because I've done a lot of research on soil, and mushrooms always come up. So just talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, mushrooms, I mean, I really say they're kind of like the motherboard. They're kind of operating, pulling all the strings behind the
Yep.
scenes. They control a lot that we can't see. It's definitely being kind of unraveled, and I feel like every time I go to another conference or I speak to more people who are doing research in the field, there's always something that's new that's coming out, and it's really amazing. Um, I think there's a lot of interesting research that's been coming around mycoheterotrophs, which are the plants that don't have chlorophyll. And so to obtain nutrients, they partner with different fungi and have these symbiotic relationships. And these fungi are also symbiotically in a relationship with trees. And so there's kind of this exchange going on between many different organisms. And on the other side of things, these mycoheterotrophs, they still produce pollen. So they need an insect to come along and produce and carry that pollen, help them reproduce. So it's really interesting phenomenon. I think the link between all of these organisms, it's interesting to see it being talked about more in media, and especially in terms of conservation, I think it's helping us make a lot more strides in terms of connecting these different moving parts, and protecting spaces of, a lot from development, and fragmentation, which for mushrooms, once a piece of forest has been developed, it's really hard to get back to that original state of, all the biodiversity that a space once had. So that's a huge element.
So for you, how do you see yourself, you know, fitting into this world of mushrooms and developing, like what is your mission or vision? And I know it's evolving, but just right now at this point in time, I know when, especially when you're in these worlds, and I know from my own experience, where you learn, you meet so many you meet so many people, there's so much research going on,
Mhm.
you're kind of soaking it all up, and then you're interacting with people through the programs you have. What right now is top of mind for how you want to evolve things, how you want
Yeah,
to grow in this world of mycology?
yeah, I'm excited because the next step is eventually, um, kind of creating and forming, hopefully getting all the paperwork done this winter, but creating this nonprofit, land trust up in New York, and hopefully having a full scale mushroom farm with both indoor and outdoor production. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, and so it's going to be a large endeavor, but hopefully, if all goes well, I'll be able to have mushroom production and do also kind of that conservation element. And it's located in kind of the southern Adirondack region. And
Nice.
so for people who are looking to, get outside and walk trails, and also do soil testing or do any sort of like tree biodiversity, research, um, kind of hoping to have like a little bit of like a research hub out in the woods, research station to that effect. So
Wow. So
hopefully,
this is your nonprofit.
yes, yeah, that's
Okay.
that's
And
what we're.
how did you end up? I mean, I know you're on the border of New York, Massachusetts on the border, but why that area? Was it just an opportunity that came up?
Yeah, yeah. So this past summer, unfortunately, my dad passed.
Sorry.
But yeah, no, it's all right. But he was really into outdoorsy, activities, and had a hunting property that he, unfortunately wasn't able to get back to in a long time. But now I'm kind of in charge of stewarding that property and taking care of it. And it's a little too much for me personally to take on by myself. And so I've I've really come to the conclusion over the past couple of years. I've known for a long time that I've wanted to share this property and open it up to the public. I definitely don't want to be just have it alone. And especially with mushrooms, there's I've been fortunate to find a lot of good species up there, and I see it as a really great teaching opportunity, for people to be able to come there. Um,
Wow, what a gift.
yeah, no, I definitely I hope that there's some sort of legacy that carries on, for him at least. With
I think it's all manifesting.
yeah, but yeah, so
That's
that's the
amazing.
plan. We'll see if it comes to
It
fruition.
will. It will. It may not be exactly the vision,
Mm,
it might come together differently, but I think that's amazing.
yeah.
So, do you have a favorite mushroom? And I know you're going to say, well, for what purpose? So
Mhm.
you decide the answer to that.
Sure, yeah.
And then answer that, and then I have one more question for you. Go ahead.
Mhm. Yeah, so gosh, it's really hard to pick.
I
It's really
know.
hard to pick.
You can
I
pick
I
two.
do, yeah, I would say like cinnabar chanterelles are just wonderful. I love looking at them. I love the like bright red flashy mushrooms. I am in that demographic of mushroom hunters that I do love the bright and the bold, flashy mushrooms with the crazy fruiting bodies. Um, yeah, that one's really up there. I also love any wax caps really. Any hygrophorus, they're really beautiful. They'll have these kind of two-toned colors where they'll be really bright scarlet red on top, and then kind of this bright like yellowish, flame color for the gills. And Yeah, just really lovely. And then, I mean, for cooking, I already mentioned, but black trumpet, it's hands down my favorite. I have a stockpile that's probably like 100 black trumpets.
Good for
Uh,
you. That's great. So, if someone, it's interesting. I just came back from woofing in Sicily,
that's
and one of the women I met was from Australia, and
awesome.
she was an attorney for 6 years, and she decided I need to figure out my life. So she left for 2 years. She's been woofing, and she's been going to all different farms, a lot in Italy, vineyards and everything. But she did some work with mushrooms, and she has a very high interest in mushroom farming. And so, but she learned a lot through these experiences. But if someone was interested in this, interested in getting into this, and they're not obviously at a point where they can go for a degree in it, how would you suggest what would you suggest they do? How can they start investigating this and learning? What would be a good first few steps?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some of the resources I started out with were mostly YouTube and Reddit, which it sounds silly
It's
recommending it now,
not. It's
but they're free and they're available. And if money is a barrier for entry, then those are some of the best resources out there. I will say, as much as Reddit gets a lot of commentary for various reasons, there's a lot of mycologists who will respond directly to you. So if you're curious about what a species is, you have cultivation questions, you'll see, well-respected people that are in this field, they'll reply directly to you. And that's, a line of communication that we've never had before with scientists. I think it's a great resource. I also, in terms of identification, not really for edibility or foraging purposes per se, but I love using Michael Kivo's mushroomexpert.com, another great free resource. And then for anyone who's a fan of iNaturalist, which is a community citizen science resource where you can post identification, there's also Mushroom Observer. And so Mushroom Observer is just for mushrooms and fungi, but you can get really expert level knowledge and feedback, which is really important for ID if you want to know what you have.
excellent. Excellent. No, it's important to know what you have. Um, So, and then my other question around that is, so if you're a farm and you're
Mhm.
not growing mushrooms, especially I guess I had told you that I'm going to be working with a farm in Westboro,
Yes, yeah.
Massachusetts. And I'm like, if I wanted to bring mushrooms in, how do people go about, like, what would be I don't know, just to think about a farm who wants to bring it in, what should you do?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, a lot of what I've seen and a lot of what I've done with outdoor cultivation has been primarily just using whatever waste resources you have on hand and making them useful again. So if the farm has a lot of logs lying around, you might want to grow out of logs. You might also want to turn those logs into wood chips, or if you have a lot of sticks laying around, turn them into wood chips. And then you could inoculate the wood chips either in raised beds, or if you have an orchard component to your farm, you could put the wood chips around the bottom of the trees. That also helps, in raised beds and in orchards with a lot of soil water retention. So if we have a drought, having mushrooms in those areas helps with production just overall. Um, I would also say I've seen a lot of the, agroforestry models where it's perhaps like the unintentional, intentional mushroom cultivation. So if you're taking down trees anyways, just leaving the logs in a big stack by the side of the field, where the air is going to be able to carry spores, and naturally over the years you'll get mushrooms popping up. And so you can intentionally cultivate, but you can also just create ideal environments for wild mushrooms on your property, and that will help with your soil and your air and your overall productivity.
Excellent. Is there anything that else that you want to convey about mushrooms that I know obviously we did a brush stroke over this, but is there anything else that you really want to get out there about this?
Yeah, I'd say a really common misconception is that just touching a mushroom will be and somehow harmful for you. And there's no mushrooms in North America um, that will give you any sort of reaction, or really shouldn't give you any sort of reaction if you're picking them up. You have to ingest a mushroom, and it has to hit your stomach and start to be really chemically digested in order for it to be poisonous and have those ill effects. So with that being said, obviously don't eat mushrooms that you don't know the identification for. But I think that statement, it kind of encourages people to get a little bit closer to the mushrooms than you normally would have. I always encourage people to, really use all of your senses when you are seeing mushrooms in the wild. Pick them up, smell them, break, a little piece off, and see if the odor changes, if there's any stain. And so that's generally what I recommend. Just get out there, get a little bit more confident every time you see those mushrooms, and not to be afraid of them, because they're not gonna jump out and bite you.
They are intimidating sometimes.
Yeah, they definitely are. But yeah, I think it's definitely a cultural aspect here.
Yes.
In America, where we lean more towards the mycophobic side of things than mycophilic. And I hope that, over the course of my lifetime, hopefully things will start to change.
Have you traveled out of the country to do any foraging?
No, not yet. I've been to Greece, and that's the only spot out of the country that I've been. And yeah, I wasn't into mushrooms at that point in my life like I am now. And I look back and I'm like, wow, I really had a missed opportunity, because Greece has a very long-standing cultural history of mushrooms and mycophagy, and yeah, it's just wonderful.
Yeah, it must be interesting. It's a whole world, and then taking it to another country, it opens up a whole new, that's kind of, that's that. Well, now when you travel.
Exactly. Yeah. It's always a factor when I'm traveling. I'm always looking for mushrooms down.
Yeah. I'm always looking for farms, and it's
Totally.
like, it's a thing. Our family's like, are like, okay. No, that's great. I'm excited for your this opportunity to come to fruition. So please keep me posted on that. I think that's really exciting. And I wish you the best of luck with that. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me today. And
definitely.
you might get some questions from this. There's so many more questions, but I just, you can dive so deep into this. It's so interesting, but I personally want to learn more. So I'm going to look into some of the resources you suggested. So
yeah, awesome.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me.
I hope our AgriTourist podcast prompts you to think more about where your food comes from, whether it be your vegetables, fruits, meats, and even those sweet treats. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with someone you think may truly benefit from or be inspired by it. Visit us at agra-tourist.com. Until next time.